didn't matter what I did. They were always going to find fault with me no matter what I did. And they always going to say that I'm a terrible person and that I'm stupid. But I wasn't stupid, so no one understood me.
I don't have any patience for it. I don't. Good morning. I'm so glad you're back. I'm so glad you're back for another episode of I'll Spare You the Details. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how Harry just feels like nobody understands him. And everybody thinks he's stupid. Well, have you shown us that you aren't stupid? I don't think so. Everything he has done so far is so boneheaded, it's almost inexplicable. Why are you spending your entire Eton education smoking in the bathroom? Why are you cutting class and eating McDonald's under the bridge and smoking? Why are you partying constantly and continually on every break you have? And then you want to say that Eton was just hard, but it's because nobody would listen to you when you said it was hard. And everybody told you you'd get it, but you weren't getting it. And it's their fault. It's their fault that you were so stupid. It's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? It's like, last episode we did a lot of talking about the fact that he was over there stumbling drunk. And then he was appalled that the media would notice. Stop noticing I can't stand up. Stop noticing I'm falling out of pubs. Drunk as a skunk. It's like, you want to act in a certain way, and then it's everybody else's sin for noticing. It's everybody else's hatefulness. How could they even say anything to me? How dare they constantly use me and constantly write things about me that aren't true? Well, you're doing things that are requiring the press to take note. Their whole job is to tell us what's going on with the royal family. That's what they're for. That's what we want to know. It's like, do you not understand that your family y'all aren't just famous people. Y'all are in political positions. Would you be offended if the press was reporting on what was going on in Parliament? You know that comes with the territory. You're a famous person, but not just a famous person. You're a politically famous person and a political family. And I know that you want to say that the royal family is not the same. Okay, yeah, they're not the same. They are in the wheelhouse, you know? And so it's just sort of like, you can't be so surprised all the time that people are taking note of you. And since you know they're going to take note of you, act in a way that is worthy of being taken note of. In a positive way. If you know they're going to write stories about you, if you know that they're going to come after you every turn of the way, make sure that what they have to talk about is not degrading to you.
But it didn't matter what I did. They were always going to find fault with me no matter what I did. And they always going to say that I'm a terrible person and that I'm stupid. But I wasn't stupid, so no one understood me.
I don't have any patience for it. I don't. So anyway, we're going to talk today about how dumb he thought he was, how dumb the press said he was, and what his plans were for after Eton. He was not going to go to university. His teachers were like, you're not university stuff, so, you might want to halt your horses there. And even Paul was like, it's not for you, dear boy. And so he's got plans about what he wants to do, and I was shocked at his plans. I mean, it was just like, once again, you really were a pothead, weren't you? And anyway, what he settles on is his gap year. We're not going to get into his gap year because his gap year is like several chapters long. It would make this video too long. So we're going to cut off right before he goes to his gap year. But I read ahead, and you guys, it doesn't seem like it went very well. So stay tuned for that. That'll be on Sunday. We'll talk about that on Sunday. I wanted to say that I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody who subscribed. I wanted to say an enormous thank you to everybody who has commented. And really, if you're not reading the comments, you should, because there's a lot of things I don't know about because I'm an American. And, the royal family has always been sort of in my peripherals. I pay attention to what's going on to some degree. But I don't know the ins and outs of the royal family. I don't know the ins and outs of royal customs and cultures and things that, all of our British friends know about. And you guys, we have such lovely people commenting from England and Ireland and Scotland and Wales. We've got people from all over the Commonwealth who are saying delightfully insightful things and pointing out, like bringing color to things that maybe I didn't have time to talk about, or just didn't know to talk about. One of those things that somebody said was, and several people said, that the story about Aunt Margot's fish pen was so disingenuous because apparently royals give gag gifts for Christmas every year. It's like a tradition. So for Harry to open up the gift and be like, oh, that was really cold-blooded. It's like, okay, well, but you knew that it was going to be a joke. You knew that many of the gifts were going to be jokes. So why are you acting so shocked? And, you know, there's probably some, you know, deeper meaning, but he didn't bother to let us know that because he just wanted us to feel like it was this cheap, junky, lame gift. And she was, you know, an old bat for doing it. So people are telling all sorts of things in the comments like that. And so if you finish the video and you're like, oh, it's over, I need more, go read the comments, you'll get more. People are also very funny in the comments as well. I'm trying to think. Oh, okay, you guys. I have to say it, you know I do, because I'm watching the numbers, friends. I'm watching these videos get, you know, thousands of views. I don't have thousands of followers. People are watching these videos, you know. You're watching, but you're not subscribing. Now let's have a little heart to heart. Does that seem fair to you? You're enjoying it, right? So just click that subscription button.
Subscribe, like, hit that bell for notifications.
You know what to do, okay?
You know what to do, so do it.
Oh, wait. Did you do it? Okay, let's go. All right. Harry, dear Harry, so confused, so alone in the world. No one understands him. No one ever's gonna understand him. And it's just more of the same. It's more of the same. And it's more... This guy's greatest gift for the laziness of his very soul was for his mother to die. Because now he has something to blame everything on. It's always somebody else's fault. It's because mother died. It's because I don't have mummy. If mummy was here, I could be a different person. If Pa was a different person. If the media wasn't always after me. You know, if the teachers at Eton had been more understanding. If. What if you stopped being an idiot and tried for 5 seconds? What about that? So he starts out this section. Remember, last time we left off, there had just been cocaine accusations. And he thought that he had gotten out of that, he'd wiggled out of that by denying it, and then, you know, the story was, didn't go to press. But now, and he was glad about that because it was about to be the Golden Jubilee. And so he did not want to overshadow this event with his failings. So he was relieved. Then he starts talking about the Golden Jubilee. And it's just a strange passage, and it's so typical of him. Because he starts out and he's talking about a family member. Who might that family member be? The Queen herself. And he'll say something that seems positive. And you're reading along, and then it gets like kind of hateful and negative and judgmental and like complaining just to complain. And then he'll end it by being like, but she's great. It's like, that doesn't work. You think we didn't hear all the stuff in the middle? You just finished saying that she was cold as ice. She would never give you a hug. She'd never even hugged your dad once. He keeps blaming her for acting in certain ways as a mother. That it's like culture dictated that she do certain things as the queen. That she had to go away. She had to go and do these royal duties. And yes, unfortunately, that meant that she couldn't be Mother of the Year. Sorry, she's a little busy being the queen. You know, it's not like there weren't 1,000 nannies to watch the kids. And I know there's no replacement for your mother. But Harry just, I just don't believe him when he says that the Queen Elizabeth never hugged her children. What kind of a mother would not hug their children? I mean, it's just a natural outpouring of motherly love to embrace your children. She didn't like give birth to these kids and then, you know, throw them to the nanny and be like, oh, you got that one? Okay, good. I'm out. I mean, if that's how she felt, she wouldn't have gone on to have 2 more kids. You know what I'm saying? She had 4 kids and they were pretty spaced out. If she just hated the whole idea of being a mom, why would she have done that? That didn't even make sense. Anyway, to get into specifics, he starts talking about the Jubilee. And, you know, he's talking lots about what it was like and the golden carriage, and it was all very fancy and everybody was excited. And, you know, he said that even the grumpiest anti-monarchs couldn't help but feel goosebumps at the pomp and circumstance of the whole thing. Okay, well, I guess Meghan wasn't in attendance there because she would have brought it down real quick. And then he says that he always says these things, just as an aside. He always says things like, there was a luncheon that day, I think, and a dinner party. You think? Why don't you look it up? I mean, your whole life is on record. You can't, why put in a detail that there was a lunch, I think? That doesn't help us. Editor. You guys, I don't care. I've had people in the comments saying, well, what do you know? Everybody says this is a super well-written book. Well, I'm here to say it's not. This sentence right here, there was a luncheon that day, I think, and a dinner party. Unnecessary. If you don't know, look it up. And if you can't find the answer, cut the sentence. Okay, so then he goes talking about how it's all just sort of a little bit like derogatory in a sense, because he's talking about how there were some big name performers there, one being Paul McCartney and the other one being Brian May. Everybody said how marvelous, May said. How miraculous that Granny should be so hip, so modern. She should allow, indeed relish all this modern rock. And it's just like, I don't know, there's just this whole sneering tone to it, you know? And then he's talking about how he was sitting right behind her and he saw her tapping her foot and swaying in time to the music and, you know, enjoying the whole thing and giving a display that she was relishing the whole performance and that she was enjoying the whole thing to the fullest. Then he says how much he wishes he could give her a hug in that moment because he liked that she was so full of life and that she was, even though she's, you know, was quite on up in years, that she wasn't acting all just old and crusty and crotchety, but she was enjoying it. And he says that he wishes he could give her a hug, but then of course he remembered the story about Mummy and that time when Mummy tried to give her a hug and Granny had jumped and swerved to avoid contact. So cold. Yes, but many people say that Diana didn't just go in for a hug. She lunged at the Queen in a desperate attempt, I suppose, to get some physical contact. But anybody in their sane mind, if somebody who had already displayed to the world that they were not quite mentally stable time and time again had lunged at you, wouldn't you swerve? I'm telling you what, if I had lived in the house with Diana and she jumped at me, I'd have swerved too. This is the same woman who threw herself down the stairs when she was pregnant to get some attention. Okay, I got mixed feelings about Diana. But anyway, Granny swerved to avoid that hug, and Harry just says, you know, that's how she was. I mean, I wished I could give her a hug, but I'd never even actually do it because, I mean, you know, this woman left her kids for months on end to go on some world tours, and when she came back, all she gave her kids was a handshake. What a cold lizard. And it's just hard to understand why he's bringing this up in the context of being so proud to see her enjoying herself. Like, why are you saying this? Why are you saying this now? I wish I could give her a hug, but since she's, you know, cold as a snake, I knew that was never going to happen. She and her husband, he was also just as cold as ice. Talk about aloof. That old geezer wouldn't even let you come near him. Not for anything. And then he ends it by saying that the concert was making him tired and he had a headache and he kind of just wanted to go home. And he wondered how Granny could still be so with it. And then he noticed, oh, what's that in her ears? Huh. Earplugs. So she's acting too. She's just acting like she's enjoying it, but she doesn't. And look at her. Look how she controls the situation. Look how she controls everything around her, even this. And then he ends it with, I really wanted to give her a hug now. I don't get that passage. Am I the dim-witted one? Am I dim-witted for not getting that? I read that and I think, well, you just finished insulting her. And you just finished saying that you didn't like how controlling everybody is all the time, controlling their emotions. Now she's found a way to control this situation where she probably was exhausted and the music probably wasn't to her taste. But she put in earplugs and she was brave and she made a good face of it anyway. And he adores that about her. So it's like, well, what do you despise her sense of control and her ability to, you know, what he would refer to as emotional rigidness? Or do you see that as a plus in the job that she has to have, and that she can just give the people what they need while still maintaining her sanity. I don't understand his feelings for her. It was a very confusing passage. Well, now it's time for him to talk more about himself. More about him and how he was confused, how he didn't know what to do, how everything around him was just too much. He says that Pa called him and Pa said, "Dear boy, it's time for us to talk about your future." So Harry and Pa go, have a little meeting, and Pa says, "Well, what do you want to do? You gotta come up with something." And Harry says that, William was off at St. Andrews and enjoying it. His dear friend Hedders from Ludgrove and also Eton, he was off. He was planning to go to Newcastle, and so Harry had to decide what he was going to do next. They sit down. Harry goes, "You know what I'd really love to do? And I've been wanting to do this for a while. I really think I'd make a great ski instructor. You know at that place that Mummy always took us? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking I want to do. Because, man, that fondue at that place we like to go to, that like rock your world. If I could do that, like ski all day and eat fondue, man, that'd be the life." It's like, you really did fry your brain, didn't you? You're a prince. You don't need to be a ski instructor eating fondue all day, okay? Back off the cheese and go find something decent to do. So Pa's like, no. And so he's like, okay, what about a safari guide? What about that? And Pa's like, no, I don't think so. And so they go back and forth. They can't decide. He wants to do something really out of the box. Kind of wants to disappear just like Mummy did. Again with Mummy's disappearance. When are you going to get over it? And then he says that, the problem is that people just don't understand him, okay? Because he was hugely ambitious. And people called him lazy, and people said that he, just wasn't with it. But, he might have looked lazy, and he might have never done any of his schoolwork, and he might have always been looking how to dip out of things. But the truth is, he had goals and ambitions. He wasn't really sure what those goals were, but he had them. And he says that this passage here to me, I was just like, well, this was an epic fail. He says, "I didn't want to be one of those cocktail slurping, eye-rolled, causing sloths everyone avoided at family gatherings. There'd have been plenty of those in my family going back centuries." Well, how unfortunate that you've become an even more unseemly blemish on the family name. You could have only hoped to be a cocktail slurping, eye-roll causing sloth, and instead you've come into the family with a machine gun, plowing everybody down in front of you. But Pa says, look, you've got to find something, some kind of work that is meaningful to you. And Pa, according to Harry, he says that Pa claims he'd always been discouraged from hard work because he couldn't do anything that was going, especially as the heir, he couldn't do anything that was going to take attention off the monarch. But he had found work that was thrilling for him, and he wanted the same thing for Harry. I just don't think that Pa would have said that. I don't believe that statement that Pa says to him, "I've always been held back because I'm not supposed to be taking anything away from the monarchy." That's such a Harry way of looking at things. I don't think Pa said that. But they've got to decide something for him to do. And it's just not press him to go to university. Pa knows that's probably not in the cards for him. Academically, it is just a blessing straight from God Almighty that he even got out of Eton. The fact that he managed that was more than anybody had ever hoped. And we can only imagine they passed that guy right on through. What are you going to hold back the prince? Please. So the thing is that everything he says is just so annoying. He says that all of his choices for life are just based on such stupidity that it boggles the mind. He talks about how, okay, I can't be a ski instructor, okay, I can't be a safari guide. Then he talks about the fact that, Pa wasn't pressing him to go to university and really didn't interest him. But he had thought about this going to the University of Bristol because maybe it might be fun to take a couple of courses in art history. A lot of pretty girls in that subject. It's like, that is so stupid. That's so dumb. That's how you guide your way through life, where the pretty girl's gonna be? No wonder you're an idiot. I mean, it's like, it's just so sophomoric. You are done with your education. You're about to embark in the world as a man. Okay? You cannot be guiding your life choices based on where are the pretty girls. Get a life. And even if there were any, he wouldn't have found them. He's too busy following like a puppy dog after the old ladies. Then he says that during this conversation, Pa sort of steered him away from the idea of university. And Pa was just like, look, let's face facts. You're not the family scholar. And he didn't say it to be cutting. Harry even says, Pa wasn't trying to hurt me. Pa wasn't trying to say something that was cutting, but it stung me. It stung me deeply. Because I didn't think he had to say that out loud. And so they just go round and round and round and round. It's a long passage of him just talking about, I didn't know what to do. I could have done this. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I can't do that because I'm a blah, 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 blah. It was so dull. Finally, they land on the fact that the army, that's what you should do. Why don't you go and use all of this energy and patriotism and love of military history? Why don't you go make some good use of that? And it seems to me that should have been thought number one in his head, because in the royal tradition, being part of the armed forces is an obvious. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, why wasn't that his thought number one? That is such a good fit for him. Ski instructor, get out of here with that. It took him so long to come around to the most obvious thing he could have possibly thought to do. So they decide that that's what he should do. He'll join the army, but he'll join the army because he really liked to play with his tin soldiers. So I guess that's an indication that this is the best career path for him. And quite frankly, probably they were right. So then Pa says, okay, but why don't you take a gap year? Take a gap year, darling boy. Have some adventures. The thing is, again, this is so classic Harry. He always writes in such kind ways about his father, with what his father says, but then all of his asides and commentary on his father as a person are so negative. And I don't know if he's trying to, I don't know what his point is there. Is he trying to make the character of Pa more well-rounded in the sense that he was really kind, but I never felt close to him? So they're trying to decide about what he's going to do. And they decide that he's going to spend some time in Australia. And so he says here, so I sat down with Marco and I tried to decide what those adventures might look like. We settled first on Australia, spent half the year working on a farm. Excellent. As for the second half of the year, Africa. I told Marco I'd like to join the fight against AIDS, that this would be an homage to Mummy. An explicit continuation of her work didn't need to be spelled out. Marco went away, did some research, came back to me, and said, Lesotho. I'd never heard of it, I confessed. He educated me. It was a landlocked country, a lovely country bordering South Africa, a lot of work, lots of need, loads of work to be done. I was overjoyed. A plan, at last. Yeah, a plan somebody else made for you. He just waits around for everybody to tell him what he's going to do. Maybe he is dumb. I hate to call anybody foolish, but maybe something isn't okay with him. He can't seem to figure out for himself what to do next. He's got like one foot nailed to the floor and he's just walking around in circles. Someone help me, someone help me, someone help me. Oh, Marco, plan, okay. And he's just completely and totally inept. Then he tells us a sad story, and this is sad. He tells us about his friend Henners, who he'd mentioned earlier in the chapter, because Henners was going away to Newcastle, but Henners was also taking a gap year. His gap year was to help out at Ludgrove, their old school. And Harry's like, oh yeah, but you're having a great time. Remember those farms we used to go and stuff our faces at the strawberries? You having a good time with that? And Henners was like, no, I'm teaching and I really enjoy it. The kids are nice and I'm kind of a handyman around there, and it's nice. And so everybody's growing up at but Harry. Harry's still over there thinking about gorging his face, and Henners is over there trying to help the kids at Ludgrove. It's just night and day with these. Harry's just getting left in the dust. That's all I can say. He was still friends with Henners, but they were kind of going their separate ways. And also Henners, according to Harry, had so much more freedom than Harry did. Henners would invite him to go to a casino in Edinburgh, and he would have to be like, no, I can't, because, what would the paper say if I showed up at a casino? And I'm waiting for him to get around to the fact later in the book when, do we not recall his time in Las Vegas? So going to a casino in Edinburgh was not okay, but Las Vegas, no one's going to care there. Like, that doesn't even make sense. Okay? At what point in his life does he have this big turnaround where it's like, oh, okay, I guess it's okay for me to be seen in the biggest party city in the world, but not Edinburgh. I'm not going to that casino. That's beyond the pale. But then the sad thing is that he says that he got a call one night. His friend had been in a car accident. He'd just been running an errand, and he didn't have a seatbelt on, and he swerved off the road and hit a tree, and he was killed. And so, of course, that was really upsetting for Harry, and of course, it brought back memories of Mummy. And there was another funeral to go to. I don't want to mock him. I mean, it would be super tragic to have your young friend die in a car accident. And of course, it would bring up thoughts of his mummy, who also had died in a car accident without a seatbelt. But this is real death. And this is, like, you can't deny that Henrys is dead here. You know? He is not coming back. So is this going to help you at all to realize that also Mummy is not coming back? Why would you make an exception for Mummy, but not for Henrys? Is he kind of come strolling around out of the shadows? Is the next sparrow you see flying by, is that going to be a message from Henrys? I mean, how does he differentiate in his head between the deaths of Henrys and his Mummy? They're both so similar in the sense that they were car accidents with people not wearing seatbelts, but one's dead and one isn't. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, now we come to the bit about his time at Eton, when it's time to graduate. And he wasn't allowed to graduate until he was actually in a theatrical production. And they take it very seriously at Eton. It's not like a couple of you and your cousins throwing together a little play for your grandparents. It's all very serious. It's Shakespeare. And they were going to do Much Ado About Nothing. Now, shout out to the genius director who cast him as Conrad. It's like, I don't know if it was an intentional slight. I don't know if it was I don't know if he just thought Harry would do really well playing this part because it was such a natural fit for who he was. But if you don't remember who Conrad was in Much Ado About Nothing, listen to this amazing description. Harry says, among other things, I learned from studying the play that it was wrong-headed and reductive to focus on Conrad's alcohol consumption. He was a fascinating guy, really. Loyal, but also immoral. Full of advice, but essentially a follower. Above all, he was a clown who provided much-needed comic relief. I found it easy to throw myself into such a role and discovered during dress rehearsals that I had a hidden talent. Being royal, it turned out, wasn't all that far from being on stage. Acting wasn't acting, no matter the context. I mean, is that not a bit of genius casting from this director? Full of advice, but essentially a follower. A clown who provided comedic relief. Amen. The whole world needed Harry. You know why Spare has been such an enormous success? It isn't because it's well written. It isn't because we care so much about Harry. It's because it's funny. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. And we all need in this time, in this world, like, this book couldn't have been written at a better time. We're so sick of thinking about politics. We're so sick of thinking about all the drama all over the world that this book is just comedic relief. He should have changed the name of his book. He shouldn't have called it Spare. He should have called it Conrad. Anyway, so he goes on to play this character, and he feels like he did a really good job. And now we come back to some more of him sliding paw. Again! He just finished giving us this long, drawn-out passage about how long he sat with Pa while they decided what his next step would be, and how Pa guided him and got him help to figure out something to do so that he could have adventures. We've just heard all about that. And now he talks about how Pa showed up, sat right in the middle of the audience, and laughed at all the wrong times. Guffawed is what he did. He just chortled and laughed and carried on, clapped at all the wrong times, laughed at all the wrong things. He acted like a complete and total buffoon. He ruined everything for me. There I was, so happy that he was going to be there, and all he did was just muck it up like he always does. Dim-witted dumb Pa. What a dud. He says that when the play was over, Pa came backstage and congratulated him, and he was a bit surly because he just couldn't get over the fact that Pa had just come and wrecked it. And he says that Pa asked him, "What's the matter, darling boy? Pa, you laughed at all the wrong times." He was baffled. I was too. How could he have no idea what I was talking about? According to Harry, it's like everybody in the audience was looking at him because they couldn't figure out what in the world was wrong with that old guy. Slowly it became clear. He told me once that when he was my age, acting in his own school performance of Shakespeare, Grandpa turned up and did exactly the same thing. Laughed at all the wrong times. Made a complete spectacle. Was Pa modeling his own father? Because he knew no other way to parent? Or was it more subliminal? More some recessive gene expressing itself? Is each generation doomed to unwittingly repeat the sins of the last? I wanted to know. Or I might have asked, but that wasn't the sort of thing you could ever raise with Pa or Grandpa. So I put it out of my mind, tried to focus on the good. Then he says, and this is so enlightening. He says, Pa's here. I told myself, he's proud, and that's not nothing. That was more than a lot of kids had. I thanked him for coming, gave him a kiss on each of his cheeks. As Conrad says, can you make no use of your discomfort? And that's what he's done his entire life. Tried to make good use of his discomfort. And he's tried to make money off of his discomfort. He's tried to get famous from his discomfort. He's tried to gain pity and sympathy and accolades from the entire world. He's tried to gather a following of people who can all lift him up in his discomfort. The greatest person in the entire world was the director who cast him as Conrad. That was an insightful gentleman, I must say. Okay, so he's completed his Eton education because he's been in some Shakespeare. And he says that it was no small feat for one so unscholarly, so limited, so distracted. And while I wasn't proud of myself, exactly, because I didn't know how to be proud of myself, I felt a distinct pause in my nonstop internal self-criticism. You want to know how to feel proud of yourself? You do things that are worthy of being proud of. But cheated in art. But he hadn't cheated. And it was all just another lie, another story to call him a dimwit. It was all just the press constantly hounding him. He hadn't done anything wrong. He hadn't cheated. And also, how do you even cheat? How do you even cheat at art? I'll tell you, Harry. Let me count the ways. You can copy somebody else's work. You can pay somebody else to do the work you should have done. You can find an old project and say that it's yours. It's a lot of ways to cheat at art. Okay. I'm not buying those goods you're peddling, okay? I mean, how could I have cheated? You can't even cheat at art. That's an impossibility. Oh, is it? Somehow people manage it. So even when it came out that he hadn't really cheated, the press had already printed that he had, and so that was the story that stuck, according to Harry. I'd never heard of this story, but he says that's the story that stuck. And he wanted to come out and have a big press conference. I've been exonerated. I'm not a cheater. You know, that teacher was wrong. I didn't cheat, because you can't really cheat at art anyway. And Pa and the rest wouldn't let him come out and have his moment. You know, the old line, never explain, never complain. Never complain, never explain. And this just didn't sit well with him, because now he said that everyone was always going to think he was this dim-witted cheater, and he didn't think it was fair. But Pa says, look, you're going to get bad press. Just don't read it. Don't read it. You can't have control over what they say, but you do have control over not reading it. Don't give them all this power. Well, that's not good enough for Harry. And he says, well, they say they didn't read it. They say they didn't. But I said at the breakfast table all the tabloids fanned out right there with the scones and the tea. And I know they say they don't read it, but then why are they still getting the tabloids? Why are the papers still in the house? That didn't make any sense, Pa. You say you don't, but I saw it at the breakfast table. And we're going to end on that complaining note. The next section is all about his gap year, so I think this is a good place to break. But it's just all more of the same. Everybody is against me. I'm not an idiot. I didn't do anything wrong. I've never done one single thing in all of my days that has ever been wrong. It's always everybody else. It's so much talk about how everyone called him stupid, but then he continually always talks about how he was cutting corners and not doing what he was supposed to do it and avoiding responsibility. Those aren't the actions of somebody who has ambition, who has goals and hopes and dreams and a specific idea of who they want to be as a person. That's somebody who's just, trying to go along to get along, taking the easiest road. You know, what's the the road of least resistance, that's the road he wants to take. And then he wants to blame everybody else because his legs are atrophying. It's like, you haven't done anything your whole life to work out the muscles of your perseverance. And you want it to be everybody else's fault that you are sloppy and gelatinous and that you have no moral fiber. That's everybody else's fault. But you have never once in your whole life taken an opportunity to strengthen yourself, to strengthen your moral courage, to strengthen your work ethic. You've never dug in. Where's your grit and perseverance, boy? Come on. But somehow it's everybody else's fault because they perceive you as lazy. They think you're lazy because you are. People didn't just come up with that out of the random blue. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. There will be another video coming out on Sunday. As I've said many a time, my schedule is supposed to be Sunday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. And I can always promise you that there will be 3 videos a week. But we are moving soon. And so sometimes real life does get in the way of one's schedule, but there will always be 3 videos a week. If the video is not out in the morning, it'll be out during later the day. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on Sunday. Bye.